Welcome to our Trade to Developer podcast. My name is Suzanne Elsey.
My name is Craig Shields, and we've often been asked to share how we've transitioned from trade to developer. We're now ready to reveal all. So we're going to talk about deal stacking in this episode.
We get
asked quite a lot on how do you stack your deal, how do you work things out. But I think really it's getting to know what you're doing first of all, isn't it really? So your area from the beginning.
Well, we talk a lot about the exit, don't we?
Yeah.
I have always wanted to have multiple exits, and we've had an example of that, haven't we, with Walnuts recently, where we had wanted to sell them. That was our sort of main objective because of the value of the properties. However, that wasn't right at the time to be doing it. It was when everything's being downvalued, and renting it was the obvious answer. And it's great because it's given us a really good asset, or two really good assets in our portfolio. But I believe your deal stack needs to work in multiple exits.
Yeah.
And that's what we typically look at, isn't it?
You've got to have a plan B, haven't you? If it doesn't stack to keep,
B, C and D.
It can also be sold at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with, obviously, I know it's slightly different, but with doing the works, if it all comes to a push, I just get back in on the tools myself and do it. If all things come to fail, you've got to have different plans, haven't you? And I think deal stacking, like I said, I've always been asked quite a lot, and I've been invited in to look at people's spreadsheets and how they stack deals, but they don't really work for me. And if anyone could put a spreadsheet together and you don't understand it, but I think starting from the beginning of, especially where I moved out of London to Kent and I didn't know the area at all, and it's knowing your area, where I would look on Rightmove at the beginning and go, it all looked cheap to me because I moved out of London. And it was like, wow, that's cheap. And I'd talk to people and they'd be like, you wouldn't want to pay that for that property. That's quite expensive. And I'm like, you wouldn't get that in London. But they're like, well, you're not in London. So it's really getting to know me. And obviously I lived in Kent now 7 years, and I can go straight onto Rightmove and I can be like, go down the properties like mid-terrace houses and go expensive, cheap. Why is it cheap? And then obviously, it's on that road because that road's got flat roofs on it, and it's only 2 bedrooms. You've got to walk through the living room to get that, and you can't turn the staircase around. So there's like a row of houses around where I live that are old Victorian terrace houses, and they're all slightly different layouts. But I've viewed all of them. I remember going and doing viewings just on all of them all the time. I think I'd done the estate agent's head in, but he just like, you're here again, like, yeah, I'm looking, like, which I was generally, but I learned so much from going into them properties thinking, oh, that one's got an add-on on the back and that one's smaller, and actually these ones you can add on more, but these ones you can't because the gardens are smaller. So it's really knowing your area, and if you start going out of your area, you start the research again. So I think the deal stack starts with know your area, know your location, and knowing what you're looking for is the best thing. And then obviously deal stacking it, I always look to do purchase, refurb cost, plus fees, contingency, and try and have 25% into keep as the refinance for buy to let, so then we can pull our money back out and go again. That doesn't happen all the time, and I think like what you said with Walnuts is that we bought that to sell. And I think I was speaking to someone else before, they said you should with our development, some of them are 12 months long, and they said you should really deal stack it every month, which we've done quite a lot. Oh no, Duke said we've sold it, we've kept it, we've sold it, we've kept it, we've sold it, we've kept it, and now we're keeping it.
Mortgages were really high, right? They've all got to go.
So I think like from when you look at the beginning, like what you said about the A, B, C and D, you've always got to have that strategy. I think you can always refinance if you're happy to leave stuff in, depending on how much money you're looking to leave in. You can always sell a property, but as long as you haven't overspent, and obviously speak to your tax advisor about how much you're going to get taxed on that when you get your profit back out. So there's all them different ways of looking at it. For us and what we do, it's always, can we get our investors' money back out because we use investors? Yes. Can we pay back the development loan? Yes. Is there 25% left in minimum? and with the contingencies built into everywhere else and all the fees are covered, yes, it's a deal for us. We can make it work. And I think that's what we do as like a rough, if it's quick, because when you're doing properties and you got to be fast, these properties come up and deals come up, people are going to see them, they're vultures, and people are out there every day doing them. So you need to see, if you're looking in an area that you don't know, and all of a sudden one comes out and you think it looks cheap and you're stacking it in a way that you don't know, you really need to know. So you need to know the area. I need to know, is things selling in that area? Like, because there's no point in doing a property up and everyone in that area is looking for refurbs. But it might not be an area where people can afford to be a first time buyer, so they don't always sell. They can sit on the market for ages. But is it strong yield for rentals? Yes. Like, there's lots of landlords in the area that keep their properties. This area that I'm talking about in particular is very strong for rentals. So it's quite clear when you walk around and you get a feel of the area. So I think going out from the start of deal stacking and getting feet on the ground, visiting these properties, going in and out of them, getting the feel for them, and actually knowing when a one comes up on that road, because generally there's houses, I know obviously in Biggin Hill, I'll relate to that, the houses are all different but
really different.
Yeah, every other house is different. They don't get the same one, but generally I'd say at least 50 to 60% of the country you get roads at the same houses.
You do.
I know obviously you get they're not, but you do get, especially in the rental market. So you can walk up a road and go, well, there's a row of Victorian or Georgian houses that are all the same. They're 5 stories and they've got basements that can, and you get to know, don't you? So it's like, well, I wouldn't buy that one because it doesn't need much work doing to it, but I'm looking for one that's really run down. But that one would be worth 500,000 rather than 750,000. You know straight away. So I know in the area that I'm particularly talking about is that they're generally, as a 3-bedroom property, is 240 to 250,000. We know that because we've done one in the area and it's been valued by a rich surveyor. So generally 60 to 80 grand to go back to brick. So really you want to be taking all of them costs off with your 25%, and that's what you're going to be looking at. So, and there's not many of them that come up for the price that we want to do that, because people want more money for it. So
we were laughed at, weren't we, when we put our offer in, and we'd worked backwards, which is a good way of doing it. You know, what is your expected GDV? Be conservative. What are your build costs? What are your other costs for stamp duty, legals, etc., and professional fees? And we knew what we needed to pay for as a maximum. And it's a similar technique if you're buying at auction, isn't it? You know, don't go over the numbers that work for you. It's taken us 7 years to make the transition from working with clients through to developing our own portfolio, and we can speed that up for you. If any of this resonates, please do register now and we can help you transition yourself from trade to developer in just 12 months. So once, if you do that very basic calculation, you can make a decision fairly quickly. But then it's about going into the detail, which is what we do once we know. But
that's it. Like if it's a buy to let, it's going to be 6 months. It might not be too much change in the market. But if you're doing something for 12 to 18 months, maybe more, there's definitely going to be a change in the market, especially what we've had in the last 2 years. So one just bought recently with a friend of mine. We was always selling it until 3 days before, and now we're keeping it because it's stacked differently. And it's like, and I'm pretty sure by the end of it, it could be different. But I think with developments, if you're deal stacking it, you should definitely keep stacking it. Keep going back in and going, does this work? Speaking to your broker, keeping up date with it. Because I think if you're doing them, you've got to know your products. If you know your area, when you're building these out, you should know what you're putting in them as well. So generally we put in click vinyl floorings, certain carpets, certain kitchens, certain doors from certain places that are all similar, but they're done to a good standard that someone would buy it, but it's done to a good standard that it's low maintenance moving forward. So if you still got that product, because we don't do big build detached houses for football players and then sell them on to big money. That is a tactic that people do, but as what we do as deal stacking for our pension that we've spoken about previously, is that there's no point in building it out for a football player, let's say, that's going to be a really top end property that someone will pay a lot of money for, but then if you change strategy halfway through, it's not going to work for your renters. You've got to get that happy medium with your product so that you don't overspend on the build to get there. So I think the area and knowing your product should always sort of stay the same, but the outcome at the end can be slightly different, can't it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and actually you just reminded me of one of my clients. She moved from near where I live. I'd done work for her for years, and she moved out more into the countryside, and she found a house that had been built from scratch and was empty for 18 months after they finished building it because they couldn't sell it.
No.
And she picked it up at a really bargain price because by that point they were desperate to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It's all done, it's cracking, all the seasons have gone past. So they then had to pay to redecorate on top of that. So it just goes to show you sometimes, those big houses are luxury for people, you know, whereas if you want to know you aren't going to have too many problems.
But if you're going to do that,
don't you?
If you're going to do that and deal stack that, then add in contingency for the property to maybe sit there for 12 months and also probably paying a higher fee for someone to sell it for you. We haven't gone down the route of doing that, and a lot of people do it and they're successful with it. But I think going back to them, like I said, I would get asked quite a lot, like, how do you stack a deal? Like, or what are you going to do with it? So I think you've got to be very clear of when you're stacking a deal exactly what you're going to do to stack it. Make your own spreadsheets. Sit down with, if you can't do spreadsheets, sit down with your bookkeeper, finance person you got around you that's in your power team that you can explain it to. That there is people that will build spreadsheets for you if you tell them what they are. So if you pay the right money, you can put a quick calculation in there. People go very far. I'm a dynamo, so obviously I can do it on probably 3 lines. But obviously some steel and tempos would probably do it over 3 or 4 different Excel sheets and then probably run it again and again.
But by the time you've done that, potentially the deal's gone.
You've lost the deal, yeah, that's right, because you've got to act fast.
So you've got to almost have a basic version and then you go into the detail. Because let's face it, most property, you're going to have some time to actually then make your offer, get it accepted. Yeah. Then you can go into more detail. You can always pull out at that point.
That's right. That's it. Yeah.
So, it's sometimes you've got to make that first step. And if you can do the fast calculation and it works, then the likelihood is once you go into detail, it's still going to work. Yeah. It's just that you're factoring in then all the costs like we would do. Yeah,
that's right. You've got to go down to because not every property could go back to brick, or not every development's going to need a new roof, or every development's going to all need new windows. It will slightly change. And people do work on, I've spoken to people about, they always say to me, well, what's your build cost and square meterage? Like, well, what am I building? You know what I mean?
Well, this is it.
What am I building? So people range. You could go from £750 a square metre a light refurb to £2,500 a metre heavy refurb, and maybe 3,000 for a new build. That could be inside the M25. It could be lower down that end of that market. And people try and work on square meterage. I think it works if you've been doing it a long while and you start to get to know your end value, and you can look at properties and go, well, that property is 78 square meters, but we've done a few in that area now that is 90 and 60, and it says on the report that they're giving £1,870 a square foot on the value or whatever. So just around numbers I'm saying, but then you genuinely get to know your area and what price it'll be. But I will always go back to the old fashioned of, I know on Rightmove that 1 bedroom property in this area is between 120 and 145,000 pound. That's obviously out in Kent. In London, that could be £350,000. But if you're going to be investing there, my team are based in Kent, so I'm knowing my area of where we are. We obviously invest down at the end of Kent, down like Margate and Thanet Way. Neither of us live there, but we know our area now. We know when something comes up, and we're like, I think when we first started looking down there, we went down there quite a few days and got on foot and just walked around and was like getting to know the area. But now we don't generally go down there as much anymore because we can look on Rightmove and go, I'm not saying all deals are on Rightmove. Obviously, a lot of deals use meeting agents and they've got stuff before it goes on the market. But we know now when it comes on, and your husband puts stuff on our group chat, And we're like, no, that don't work. No, that don't, because we know our area. Don't even have to click on them sometimes. You're just like, that's too expensive, or say like, you just know. Obviously, going and getting deals, I'm not saying, like I said a minute ago, it's not about on right move. It is about building relationships and getting out there and doing it. But to deal stack something, you really need to know your area, because if you don't, then it's going to be...
It's more risk.
Yeah.
It's more risk, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. So
minimise the risk as much as possible.
Thank you all for listening, and thank you all for your support, and please subscribe to the upcoming podcasts.
Just remember the famous quote from Henry Ford: if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.